Okay, welcome everyone. We'll just give it a few seconds while everyone's dropping in. We've got a lot of people on the call today. Okay, all right. Welcome back everyone to Pitch on Demand. This is the third webinar in the series, the third and final webinar. I'd like to begin today by acknowledging the traditional owners of the lands on which we live and work. For me, that's the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and I'd like to pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. So today we are delighted to have Oliver Jones joining us from Apple TV. Oliver is the Senior Creative Executive there. Welcome, Oliver. Welcome back.
Hi, nice to see everyone. Thanks for having
Um,
me.
Thanks. So, can we just start with a overview for the audience on your role, what territories you cover within that role at Apple TV?
Yes, so I oversee the global international team, which spans nearly all territories globally. We do shows which are either kind of US-sized budgets or high European budgets, which are set in international territories. So when we say international territories, we refer to not the US or not the UK, because we have local teams in both of those places.
Mhm.
Anywhere else in the world. So that would include Australia, that would include New Zealand, and anywhere that doesn't have a local team for Apple. We also look at local originals for anywhere in the world that doesn't have a local team. So we have two people in France, we have two people in Germany, we have one person in Korea and one person in LATAM that was focused on local specific shows for those markets. Anywhere else in the world that I didn't mention, so it's the UK and those four, flows through us. So we really do a combination of that. And then we also look at co-pro and acquisition, and we do those kind of on a selective basis, but really we treat them as originals when we take them on board. So really, I'm responsible for the kind of cohesive international strategy for Apple TV Plus.
Fantastic. And I remember when we spoke last year, you were very interested in Australia and developing the Australian slate in particular. Can you tell us a little bit about how that's progressed in the past year?
Yes, well, I will say there has been a commissioning slowdown in the US that you are probably aware of, which somewhat affected certain international markets for us growing at the speed that we would have hoped. But we have greenlit our first Australian original, a series called The Dispatcher, starring Patrick Brummel from Colin for Accounts, written by Chris Mercer, which is coming together really well, produced by Joanna Werner. So that we're really excited about, and we have a number of writers' rooms which are going currently for Australia and New Zealand-based shows, and we have bought many shows set in Australia and New Zealand, which are in development, including projects with Seesaw, with Easy Tiger, with Matchbox. I will be forgetting a bunch more that we're doing, but there's a few of them. So I think we have quite an exciting slate now, actually. So I think you'll see more. Our development process takes longer than most because we do develop quite deeply. So
Mhm.
that's why there's been a slight delay. I think when I spoke to you last year, we were just starting to really
Mm.
aggressively buy in those territories. But I think we probably have about 12 to 15 projects now in
Wow,
development.
that's fantastic. Could you talk a little bit about that development process? Like, what are the hoops you go through once you're keen to greenlight a project and sort of what that process looks like?
Our standard process is to get two scripts and a series format, and then we make a decision on Greenlight.
Mm.
So a series format to us, and this is really just designed because my bosses like to read it at this length, is 12 to 15 pages, which just gives us mainly a brief overview of season one, but also gives you an idea of the characters and maybe where it can go in future seasons and speaks about theme and why now and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We will sometimes share a script up the tent pole just with a script in a series format, and in that instance, we may open a writer's room before we go to Greenlight. But the
Mhm.
standard process is two scripts in a series format. And we're really open. We buy scripts in-house and we develop them in-house. So we're open to verbal pitches, we're open to written pitches. It's helpful if you have a script. Sometimes I think if a script comes in, we will say, okay, let's do a couple of revisions on the pilot and then order a backup script. But it's all in mind for getting enough material to be able to make a informed assessment on whether we want to greenlight it, but also so we can hit the ground running with enough scripts to budget.
Okay. So when it does come to pitching, can we just talk a little bit about that? And when someone comes to you with a project, what's kind of the ideal pitch for you?
I personally like a verbal pitch because I like to see how the writer's mind works. But we are open to both. Like we work with European producers and American producers and Australian producers. So there are different styles in different territories. So we're really kind of versed, I think, with seeing different styles. But normally for a verbal pitch, it's about 30 minutes. We will get an overview of the pilot story. We will
Mhm.
get an overview of season one, going into the main kind of beats, but focused on character and character arc, as opposed to just this happens and this happens and this happens and this happens. We like to have a brief overview of future seasons just to understand where it could go, but that can be very brief. And then we do like to hear about the central characters, the why now, the themes of the piece. Trying to think if there's anything else that we. No, I think that's about it. And it is helpful to have visuals, I will say. So if you're
Mhm.
doing a pitch, just because we hear so many a week, we hear about 10 to 15 pitches a week.
Yeah,
So
wow.
it's just helpful to, when we've got a lot of information in our head, to kind of keep focus rather than just having a lot of words regurgitated at you.
How do you keep that focus there? Like, do you have any tips or like tricks that you use up
God,
and
I don't know if I have any. I think it's just we, the team, my team loves their jobs
Mm,
and really appreciates good storytelling. So there's nothing more exciting than really good storytelling with someone who's really passionate about this idea and feels like they are the only person who can tell it.
mm,
And I will say the when someone's done the work, you can tell that they've done the work.
yeah.
And we're really looking at Apple, which makes it slightly harder to kind of get things past with us for really fresh, original concepts. So things that don't feel overly familiar, that don't feel kind of standardized, cops, lawyers, procedural, things that we've seen before. We want it to be enough of a commercial genre that the audience will be hooked in, but we need it to have a 15 to 20% twist that we
Mm,
feel is fresh enough and unique enough. So that's what we're looking for. And then in terms of the writer, we're looking for an authorship of voice and
mm.
someone that has the kind of depth and level of sophistication that can really write multifaceted characters that don't feel kind of two-dimensional or archetypal, I would say. So
I
if
guess
all the
across.
things come together, it helps us
Mm.
focus because you know when that's there and when it's not.
I guess there's a little bit of crossing over there, I guess, into the pitch on demand brief and sort of looking at for the purposes of this, what kind of projects you'd like to look at. So I'll just reference as well for the audience. I know I can see a lot of questions coming into the chat box there. We will get to those very soon and keep feeding them through. Before we do, for the purposes of Pitch on Demand, what kind of projects would you like to see in the one-page pictures?
We really, I think there is a new emphasis on commercially minded shows.
Hmm.
So I think when we first started at Apple, we were very lucky that we could really have free reign and we were able to do some beautiful shows. But I would say some of them were a little more kind of auteur driven, kind of indie film and feel. Um, and we've always had an aversion to anything that feels overly broadcast. So anything that's kind of shallow in character work or that feels, what they would term in the US like a broadcast show. So we've always looked, but I think increasingly more now at kind of the intersection of premium and sophisticated that meets at that intersection of commercial. And I think, we've been very lucky and we're proud recently that a few of the things that we've put out, Severance and The Studio and
Amazing.
Friends and Neighbors
Mhm.
and Drops of God and Tehran, which both won the international Emmys for us, have had all of those elements together. And I think that's really what we're after. So we really want contemporary or near contemporary shows. We're really not looking for deep period.
Mm.
So I say this all the time, but and then I get loads of them. And we have greenlit a fair amount, but it's really hard to get that done. Maybe 80s is okay, but like I think anything earlier than that is difficult for us. We're not really in the young adult genre, so we probably wouldn't do something like Heartbreak High, but we
Mhm.
would do four quadrants. You know, we make a series called Monarch Legacy of Monsters, which is a Godzilla series, which we actually make through the international team, and that's kind of younger characters and older characters. And Stranger Things is a reference point, I think, of something we would have done. Um, but it needs to have access points for different ages if there are going to be younger characters. I think I've said this before, but anything too religious, anything too political is a little difficult for Apple. We don't want to look like we're taking a side. We really need the contemporary commercial genres. That's what we're after. Family dramas, mystery thrillers, romance, action. We're open to crime as long as it's differentiated and feels unique, but there are some really good Australian crime stories actually, so we've definitely been looking at a few of those. We have one with Tony Ayres that we're developing based on a true Australian crime. Um, yeah, I don't think there's anything else. Oh, and we are looking for comedy and comedy drama, which we weren't for a while. We've just bought a really great comedy from Easy Tiger that we are excited about. Um, with a big star attached. So we're definitely looking at kind of Australian and New Zealand comedies. They need to, I think the things that bump a little for Apple, Apple shows really move. They have a pace. So
Mhm.
they need to have a depth of character work and they need to have a pace. If they feel kind of slightly more local or kind of slightly slower or kind of situational, or if they feel small as a show, I think that's where we struggle a little bit. But small doesn't mean we can't do smaller shows. They just
Mhm.
have to have a big ambition within a smaller box. But I think things like, from Australia recently, like Colin from Accounts or Deadlock, I think was shows that we admired over here and many others as well. But those are the type of things from recent Australian shows that we probably would have done if we'd been around at the time.
Okay, I think you've answered about 10 of the questions.
Oh, sorry.
That's great there. But maybe could you say what feels oversupplied on Apple TV right now?
Well, we actually have a lot of spy stuff.
Hmm.
We did have a spy summit because there were a different spy show coming in from every team, so we had to choose. So the difficult thing about spy is that it works so well for us. Obviously, Slow Horses and Tehran have both been hits for us. So never say never on spy. It just has to be differentiated from everything else that's out there, and our competitors have a lot. We also have a lot of sci-fi. And again, it's quite hard to go up against Foundation and Silo and Dark Matter and Monarch and like all of those big brand sci-fis. But the sci-fi, we have a really inbuilt sci-fi audience. So if it does feel different enough, I do think we could do it. It just needs to feel different enough. So I'd say for both of those genres, just a different way in
Hmm.
we'll always consider, but just be aware of everything else we have. We don't commission by territory and say we're going to ignore what else we have on the service. We look at it as one cohesive whole. So if we have a show that is like something else, we're not going to do an Australian version of that, for example. We'll go. So that's worth considering. So I always say to producers, just if you're going to pitch us, really know what else we have, like know the service, because there's quite a lot of things we've already touched. So we're just looking for, we don't want to repeat old ground. We want to kind of come up with a show that people wouldn't think we would have done.
Okay, some great advice for our audience members today. Are you prioritizing stories that can run multiple seasons?
Yes.
Okay,
Short answer, yes.
short answer. Um, Do you have a preference for shows versus features from ANZ producers?
My team only does TV, and I would say the impetus is for Australia and New Zealand is TV. But we do have a features team. They are based in the US executives, and they will look at Australian features. So I can provide you those names if you'd like to know who to reach out to for that.
Yes, that would be great. Um, okay, so Apple TV has a varied comedy slate going forward. Are you tonally more interested in feel-good comedies like Ted Lasso, or are you open to darker comedies like Bad Sisters or Righteous Gemstones?
I'm glad you say we have a comedy slate because I actually think we're kind of lower in comedy than some of the dramas. But um, you know, Apple does tend to look for series with heart,
Mhm.
that have big hearts. So I do think the feel-good shows do really well. And one of the things that we've been discussing recently, especially, since my bosses are US based, is that the world is pretty dark now and kind of political. So we are looking for more feel-good fare. It just needs to have some depth to it. But we're really open. Yeah, I mean, we definitely would do Bad Sisters again for sure. Um, I think we're open to all, any and all. We just don't want bleak. Dark is fine, but bleak is not.
Dark but not bleak.
Yeah.
Okay. It's an interesting one. If an emerging creator submits a series concept, but Apple TV feels the story is better suited as a feature, how is that typically handled in terms of development and creative ownership?
If we thought it was better suited as a feature, we'd probably pass it on to our features team and then let them assess.
Hmm.
So that would be how it would work, and then it would be up to them whether they felt it was indeed suited to a feature for them. But we wouldn't commission it. It would go to our features.
And just going back to the series, are you interested in limited series?
We are open to them because, we do have a bias to have a star if we can. Doesn't need to walk in with a star, but it's helpful if it does, but it doesn't need to. So I think we will always do some limited, but ongoing is preferable because a lot of those limiteds kind of walk in with big packages, I would say. So ongoing is preferable.
Okay, so that's another question I have about cast. Are you saying that you would want a big star for a limited series? What if it's not a limited series? Is cast critical?
Yeah, I mean, I probably would be lying if I didn't say that we tend to default towards bigger actors.
Mhm.
But we've certainly done shows like Tehran, like Drops of God, even like Bad Sisters, that had locally well-known actors as opposed to kind of globally well-known actors. If you can get us Joel Edgerton, Rose Byrne, Nicole Kidman, Naomi Watts, Sam Worthington, please do get them because I think that is a great way to cut through really quickly.
Mhm.
But I normally say to producers, we need a star role. You don't
Mhm.
necessarily have to bring it in with the star, but we need a role that is multifaceted enough, central enough that it feels like if we wanted to get a big actor, we probably could. So it's more about how you develop it,
Mhm.
as opposed to how you package it.
Okay.
Because if we want to do it, we normally can get that actor. But when we can't is if the role is not meaty enough.
Mhm. Okay, so I guess that on the flip side is there's quite a few questions about emerging creators pitching to Apple.
Mhm.
Um, would you provide development support if there was a really standout project from an emerging creator? Or would you do something like attach what would you do to mitigate the risk of working with an emerging creator or a first-time showrunner?
Well, we've certainly done it before.
Mm,
We do tend to work with more established writers, but it doesn't mean that we will not take risks on exciting new voices because I think you often get a very fresh perspective, right, from something else.
Mm.
And particularly in Australia and New Zealand, we found a lot of really exciting new voices, which we like a lot. So we're not opposed to it. I would just say if you are an emerging creator, I would partner with a well-established Australian production company, New Zealand production company, so that we can feel confident that you have the dramaturgical development support to get you through that. And we would probably develop it at the beginning with just the writer, as long as they could do it on the page. And then when we went to production, if we felt like they needed some support, we may bring on a show running partner.
Okay.
Or kind of build out some kind of senior level support in a room.
Cute. Uh, oh, question here for you. Have you been pitched a mushroom case show yet?
Yes.
There we go. I would be surprised if you hadn't. Um, sci-fi or horror? Question mark.
Horror, we're actually quite interested in. I'm not sure if guess I didn't mention that when we spoke about the
Hmm.
genres. Servant did really well on our platform, which is M. Night Shyamalan's show, and we haven't really followed it up with much horror. So we're actually quite interested in horror. Um, it can't be slasher, so we wouldn't do like Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I guess that's probably pretty obvious.
Mm.
But psychological horror for sure. And the tricky thing about horror is how do you sustain it? So
Mm.
it's either like Haunting on Hill House and it's a one season anthological thing. There's been quite a lot of anthological horror just generally, so we'd rather it be ongoing. But that's always the question that we ask. I do think we could do social horror, like
Mm.
Jordan Peele, kind of thematic social horror. I think that's an area we're quite interested in. And then sci-fi, I think I mentioned before, always open to it, but just needs to differentiate from everything else we have.
Okay. So there's, for the audience, there's quite a lot of questions about unscripted. To clarify that we're talking about scripted only today.
Yes.
Are you open to adult animation?
We have done a couple of them via our domestic team. It's not that we couldn't do it, but I will say that our team doesn't really come from an animation background. So you'd need to lead us to water a little bit.
Mhm.
The focus is really live action, but there's no rule saying we couldn't do it, but we don't have a separate animation team.
Or children's animation as well?
We have a children's department. Yeah,
Okay.
so they would look at children's animation and they would look at kind of early age live action as well.
Okay, fantastic. There are a lot of questions about those. Are you interested in real life stories that may be dramatized in a comedic way?
Yes, although I will say there was a project that we had recently which actually got scuppered by legal issues with clearance of real life people's rights.
Hmm.
So I would just say if you're bringing us a real life story, just make sure that you have the life rights of the person that you're telling or that you're fictionalizing it so you don't need those life rights. Because it was a shame. I shouldn't say which it is, but it was a relatively high profile project that we had to not go ahead with because we couldn't get it past our legal teams.
Okay, just being careful on the rights. So, let me see. Um, budget. Sorry, there were quite a few questions about the budget size here per episode. Anything you can reference there?
We don't have a limit. We don't have a budget limit. So I think,
That's nice.
yeah, we don't have a budget limit.
Yes.
So our biggest shows, we'd want to take advantage of the Australian tax break, and it would depend on what kind of show it was. If it was a huge Australian star like a Nicole Kidman in a show that we felt could travel globally, we would probably raise that. And if it was more locally minded, it would be fitting with kind of more local budget levels. But I think our budgets are going to be higher than most.
Okay, great. And just coming back to what you mentioned about two scripts for the pitch. So in terms of when people submitting for this one-page pitch for Pitch on Demand, you'll see the pitch, you'll like what you see, you want to have a chat with them. What would you want to see after that, or them to have ready to go at that stage?
Well, we wouldn't expect you to have the two scripts in the series format. I'm saying like in success, we would develop those in-house. So if
Okay.
you have, great. But yeah, I guess tell us enough that we can be intrigued by the pitch.
Mm,
And then when I spoke through the kind of parameters for the verbal pitching earlier, I would say that's what we'd like to see.
okay. And in terms of visuals, are you open to sizzle reels, proof of concept? Do you like to see
Yeah,
some of that?
definitely. Yeah, sure.
Okay.
More
Good.
visuals, the better, I think.
Good to know. Okay. Do you have an example of a project that was so close but just missed the mark? What happened?
In Australia or just generally?
If you have an Australian, sure, but otherwise just generally is good too.
It's very hard to say because there's been many, but for very different reasons. I think what's I think sometimes, it's interesting. There are certain like key tenets to Apple shows which are kind of non-negotiable, which include a kind of real sense of propulsion and story drive, that include a very climactic ending and a kind of impactful opening, that include big twists and turns moving throughout. So I think, and also we're very sensitive to kind of overuse of exposition in dialogue. So there's been a couple of things where, despite giving notes about propulsion, that they've felt slower um, than we would have liked, and maybe not as kind of driving and compelling. And then also that where some of the dialogue felt a little heavy-handed. So we're really looking for kind of subtexting dialogue and um, depth of character and cohesiveness of tone, I would say. Like I will say to people a lot, like sometimes I say to people a lot, producers and writers, like own your genre. So whatever genre it is, even if it's a mashup of a few, you have to be leading with one genre. So sometimes it feels like, well, it's comedy in the beginning bit, and then it's a drama, and then it's this. It's like you've got to have a cohesive tone throughout. And if you're setting up, for example, a murder mystery, you've got to hit the key tenets of what makes a good murder mystery, in addition to all the character work. So sometimes it feels like they're servicing things they've got closed. I'm thinking of one specific project. They're kind of servicing too many things at once.
All right. Well, I think that we're getting close to time. So just to recap on the brief that we're looking for, we want, and please correct me if I'm off here at all. So you're looking for an emphasis on commercially minded shows. You do really like family dramas, mystery thrillers, romance, action, comedy drama. References could be Colin from Accounts or Deadlock. You are interested in horror, but not slasher, but you definitely are looking at horror, perhaps in the vein of Jordan Peele, that social horror. And you have too much spy content at the moment, so maybe not a spy drama, or YA, or period, unless it's the furthest back you would go is the 80s in terms of a period piece, and no politics or religion. Anything I have missed, do you think there?
You can do it can have politics and religion with like a small p or a small r. It just needs to be in the background. It can't be this is a takedown of a modern political figure, for example. So I think we can do a little bit of that. No, I think you got it. I would just say the really great thing about being at Apple is that we take a lot of risks. We
Mm.
develop really deeply, and when we get behind something, we really support it. So often the things that have broken out for us have not been things that we set out as a brief. So I
Mm.
say all these genres, but the things that come in have been the most unexpected ideas
Yeah.
that really feel fresh and new and unique. So I would just say to people, challenge yourself. I think we're in a kind of privileged position because we're somewhat boutique when compared to our kind of rival streamers like Netflix and Amazon. So we don't have to be everything to everyone. So the kind of core tenets of streaming sophistication is really what we're after. So come to us with your most shocking idea that feels completely fresh, completely unique, and we're probably the home that's going to do it.
Oh, that's fantastic. And that's a great note to leave it on today. Thank you so much for your time today, Oliver.
Of
To our
course.
to our audience members, the portal will open at midday today for applications. And as Oliver says, challenge yourself. All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.
Thanks everyone for coming. I really appreciate it. Take care.
Bye.